Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 23rd episode of The Inbox, where I answer your questions. And today we're going to start off with Syndra SVW's question, saying that if you're in a big multi-crew ship and someone blows a hole in the wall of the ship, not sure if that's the correct term, maybe hole, correct? It would be a hole in the hole. What will happen? Will you get sucked out into space, but still be able to use your jetpack, assuming you have your suit on? Keep up the awesome work. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting dynamic, and it's going to kind of depend on the type of ship that you're actually in. You know, if you're in a large multi-crew ship, most of them are actually going to have airlocks that are in place. So let's use like the Constellation as an example. So let's say you're up in the bridge, and somebody blows a hole in the, the deck that can drop down, or the side of the ship. It doesn't really matter, but in the back section. You've got a couple sets of airlocks there. So if you're up there, your ship's probably going to suffer. You're going to notice different mechanical flight issues, I would guess, because it's probably some severe damage to your ship. But as far as your experience up front, outside of flashing lights and stuff, you're still in a compressed environment. You're still in that airlock. Now, let's say for some reason those doors weren't closed and you were walking around on the bridge. And having those doors open would be silly. But you, at that point, would probably then end up getting sucked to the back of the ship. And unless you're able to block yourself somehow, or if there's a mechanic in-game to grab something, you probably are going to get sucked out into the ship. Now, it also depends on how much atmosphere is in the ship and how much is in space. Well, we know what's in space, but what I'm getting at is if you're far enough away, you may get sucked back into the cargo hold, but if the pressure can neutralize before you get sucked out, you may end up then just being in the back of the ship using your jetpack to try and counteract and get back up to where it's a little bit safer. So there's a lot of factors that are actually going to go into it. Let's use that example though and say that you're in the cargo hold of the ship and the wall gets blown out. And that's obviously a smaller area of space, then yes, you would end up getting sucked out at that point. So I'm not sure those mechanics are in place. We see a lot of problems today with the physics grids that they're using and the localized ones. Like right now, you can't actually do damage to anybody while you're in a ship, but we know that's something that's going to be adjusted and fixed at some point. So there's some things that need to take place in order for that to happen, but I think that is the vision that they have. If you're close enough to where the pressure hasn't neutralized, you're going to end up getting blasted out of the ship. Jonty1350 says, is it possible to get other ships in Arena Commander or even the mini PTU without paying real-life money? Yes, there today is what's known as REC. It's basically your currency that you can use from playing the game. Now, today what we have is actually going to be earned in Arena Commander. You can get that through racing, you can get that through combat. There's different things that you can do where you can actually earn that currency and then rent the ships through the Electronic Access Store, and they last for about a week of in-game time. Now, that's not going to be anything that you can, keep on a, semi-regular basis because we don't have persistence yet, though your account does recognize that you've got a countdown timer. Now, what we're eventually going to get is in-game currency for Alpha, for Beta, for the Persistent Universe. And when that happens, you're going to be able to buy ships exclusively through in-game currency. So it's sort of in place today. It's a kind of a nice test bed for what's going to be coming. And I absolutely encourage people to use the REC because you can try out ships before you buy them. But as far as like persistent and keeping them permanently in your fleet, that's not in place yet, but it's coming soon. Tomb says, any word on industry? As long as blueprints were slightly rare to own, it could open up massive content between corporations. I don't think I've personally seen anything mentioned about this. I think there's ships in game that hint to some things that could potentially be done. If you think about like data runners, and you also think back to the Project Uadine, you heard about a ship that was capturing information from a secured transmission. I think you could potentially steal plans and sell them off to another provider. But you got to remember, some of that's going to be like real corporations in life. Some are going to play by the rules, some are not. So a shadier manufacturer, let's just say Drake, may be willing to buy ship plans from that you stole from Misk, but Misk may not be interested or willing, based on their reputation, to want to buy stuff from Anvil. There's probably a certain relationship between them. Not to mention, the ships are all readily available, so you could potentially, just purchase a ship, reverse engineer it, and then end up building it yourself or something very similar. So I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of that high-level corporate espionage. There's probably going to be some. But how that ends up, converting into game stuff, it's harder to say. We may end up getting to a point where we get a higher level of construction ability, and then, if you're able to create a blueprint of something that you've created, and then you take it and sell it to another manufacturer, that may be something that's feasible. But I'm not sure how much of it's going to be, like competition between different corporations or development teams. Solanus Hugs a Lot says, how would we interact with NPC ships in the verse, seeing as most ships are going to be NPC controlled and VoIP might interact wonky because of foreign dialects? I think that is the significant blocker for NPC communication. Because when you start talking about it, I'm not even talking about foreign dialects, and I think we're on the same page here. Not necessarily like Xian or Teverin or the other races in the game, but on Earth today we have players from all angles and different places of the planet, meaning that we all speak different languages or have different. Oh my God, I can't think of the word. Accents. There we go. Different accents. So it's going to be hard for the voice recognition to work with NPCs. Now, with players, I don't envision that being as big of a problem because it's not voice recognition. You got the human brain. You can try and react to each other, nonverbal cues. There's different things. Not to mention, you can always fall back on text. I would guess that with the NPC ships in the game, we might have an ability to use voice. I wouldn't be surprised if text gets reworked and you can end up using text for some level of interaction. We got a little bit of that in Elite Dangerous, but it didn't work real well. So it's going to kind of depend on how they want to put it in place, but I could see it being kind of a combination of the two, or even potentially a choose your type of interaction. Somebody comes over and they say something and it's clearly hostile. You can say you're going to cooperate, or you're going to, you could then choose to fight back as an option. So there may be a couple different ways that they can actually implement that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's different options just to cover different places people are from and, what their current demographics are. Duncan Cassie says, hey, question, are you sure you're not the same person as Devildog Gamer? You sound and talk so much like him. I've watched a few Devildog Gamer's videos. I like Devildog. I'm not Devildog. He's got a much larger subscriber base than I do. But maybe I will try and see if he wants to do a co-op video or something to where we can confuse the hell out of everybody. We won't say who's talking. We'll just start talking and see if you guys can figure out who's who. That's not a promise. I've never reached out to him before, but that would be kind of funny. The Jet Nerd. How do you think they'll support the verse in the long run? It appears as if many aspects concerning NPCs could be random, thus needing either a script, quantum computing, or the best algorithms ever to make it possible. Could it be possible that the devs are implementing scripts, efforts, or events sort of like DLCs in the long run? After an update, a possible revolution in a system occurs, player actions could influence the outcome, etc. Okay, so the NPC interactions are going to be somewhat random, and I think there's going to be a certain amount of scripting. I don't know if it's going to be like procedurally generated missions for these different NPCs that are out there. There's probably going to be some fairly repetitive stuff in there, themes, but they end up using different phrasing. But as far as the way that it's actually implemented and the devs' involvement in it all, we know that they're going to continue to develop content. They're going to continue to kind of try and make the world interactive. So while the day-to-day interactions that you have with NPCs may be very similar, like, hey, would you mind escorting me? I'll pay you this. Or would you like to get on my ship? I'll pay you this to help me do mining, or something like that. Or, pull over your ship, you scurvy dog, I'm going to pirate the hell out of you. Those things are probably going to be fairly repetitive. And there's probably a wide enough basis of situations that it's going to be different, but there's going to be similar themes is what I'm getting at. But the devs are going to have an impact on the overall environment and the conditions of the universe that we're playing in. So occasionally they may end up saying, here comes a giant alien revolution that ends up intruding onto our system, and they're trying to get back some of what used to be their historic ground, and then we have content based on that. Or it could be that there's a massive illness that breaks out on a planet, and maybe somebody creates a blockade to prevent people from bringing aid. There's going to be different things that happen, so I think there's going to be events where things are totally new, and then there's going to be some level of sort of different but similar themed interactions that we have. Brandon Porter says, STL, do you perhaps know anything about other races? I can't really find much on it and was thinking maybe you would know if we're actually able to play as other races in the future. To this point, it's been something that CIG has considered but has not yet confirmed. My guess is that we're, at least for the very foreseeable future, not going to be able to play as other races. Now, you may be able to team up with other races. Like, there's a possibility you could work on a Banu ship or a GN ship or something like that. But as far as your actual character, at least for the short term, you're not necessarily going to be able to play as the other races. Now, as far as just knowing about them, yeah, I know quite a bit about the other races, and maybe that's a good opportunity for a video that I'll do when I've got some time to actually sit down and do kind of a breakdown of the different alien races that we have and just provide some background and the information that we have to this point. And for the last question in this video, it's from Z Pero. STL, what armament does the Freelancer DUR have compared to the MISS version? It seems like the only difference is the missile reloading system with extra missiles on the MISS, but there's been so many changes to the Freelancer that I'm not sure anymore. Also, how good do you think the Avenger... Well, I'll get to that part in a second. So as far as MISS versus DUR, we're kind of in a gray area because what they've done with all these ships is they've worked on the base model and they've made changes to the base model, and then they're going to fix and implement the other ships later. So the information that we have currently is probably outdated. You know, currently what it's saying is that there's size 4s on the wings, or not on the wings, on the unmanned turrets on the Freelancer. But we know that when we got the new Freelancer, it went from having the size 4s to the size 3s. We've got the tarantulas there. And that was a balancing decision. So if we look at the stats that are on the page right now, it's a little bit different. You know, we're looking at it and saying, okay, well, the MISS and the DUR both have the size 4s again, but I don't think that's going to be what it ends up being. That being said, the DUR is a dedicated exploration variant. The MISS is a dedicated militia kind of combat variant missile boat. I wouldn't be surprised if the MISS ends up retaining the quoted size 4 weapons on the sides, whereas the DUR ends up matching the base Freelancer with size 3s. That hasn't been confirmed, but it's possible when they implement it that might be a balancing decision, dependent on how much cargo you're sacrificing in the back. Also, keep in mind that the DUR has extended and reinforced fuel tanks, and the MISS is actually sacrificing quite a bit of cargo in the back. How much, we don't know at this point, but is sacrificing cargo for that missile replenishing system. So overall, the differences are the MISS has a lot more missiles. It's got what I assume is a better power plant because it's the super versus the regular version of the same power plant. Probably better engines because the MISS is listed with the Arc Elite versus Arc Duo. And then when you combine the possibility for higher guns. So basically, I think the MISS is just going to probably be a better option for combat, and I think we're going to see the balance in place because of that. The DUR may even end up a little bit weaker than the base Freelancer as far as weaponry is concerned, based on the trade-offs you have to make. So it's a hard comparison because we don't know until they actually implement the variants in, and then once they actually make the adjustments to get them to where they want to be. The other part of your question was also, how good do you think the Avenger is ultimately going to end up being? It feels like its combat abilities have only taken hits since the ship's release, and I'm kind of discouraged from keeping mine, since what I want is a ship capable of defending its cargo really well. The Avenger has always been a well-rounded ship in my mind, and you're right, it can do some cargo hauling, but it's never really been a cargo hauler. It's kind of just been able to do a little bit of everything. I still think it's a more prickly target to tackle for the cargo as opposed to something like a Aurora CL, or maybe like a Hull A. But as far as being where it's going to end up, we don't know. This ship has changed drastically based on what we were sold initially. It's supposed to be a boom and zoom fighter. Initially, it had a size 5 engine and a size 5 nose gun. Obviously, those needed to change with the new size of weapons. But the idea was always it was going to be an interceptor. It was going to be fast. It was going to be really powerful in a straight line. And I think that's changed some, although the size 3 Tiger Strike on the nose still absolutely is a good performing weapon. So I think it's in a fairly okay place right now, especially when you consider price to performance ratio, as well as you add in the versatility factors of the ship. I don't think you're going to see it end up getting any worse than it is today. It may end up getting some buffs depending on how things go, but I wouldn't necessarily count on those either. I still think it's a good option for what you want to do with it, but it's like a lot of ships. Nothing is going to be the best at everything. You know, it's got to make trade-offs, or it's got to be just decent at everything, and I think that's where we're seeing the ship today. So that's it for the questions on this episode. I'll have another one up shortly. I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget your questions in if you want answers, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.